I knew exactly who was standing behind me before I even turned around. 6 years had passed since I last heard Nathan Carter say my name. But apparently some voices do not become unfamiliar just because you spend years trying to forget them. Ryan. My hand tightened around the glass of sparkling water I had been holding while pretending to enjoy a Saturday night fundraiser at a renovated hotel in downtown Boston. Around me, people laughed beneath warm lights, glasses touched, and a jazz trio played near the far end of the ballroom. Everything continued normally except me. I turned slowly. Nathan stood about 6 feet away, wearing a dark navy suit, and the same stunned expression I imagined was on my face. He looked older, obviously. 30 instead of 24. His dark brown hair was shorter, his features more mature, but his eyes were exactly as I remembered them. That annoyed me more than it should have. "Hi," he said. Of all the words he could have chosen after 6 years, somehow he had chosen the smallest one. "Hi." Nathan glanced around as though checking whether the universe had arranged this deliberately. "I did not know you would be here." I could say the same thing. My voice sounded remarkably calm. I considered that a personal achievement. My friend Claire had convinced me to attend because the fundraiser supported an arts program my design studio had worked with for years. I had expected mediocre appetizers, polite conversations, and perhaps an opportunity to leave before 10. I had not expected my past to walk through the ballroom wearing polished shoes. Nathan shifted his weight. "You look good." "Thank you. How have you been?" There it was, the impossible question people asked when they wanted several years compressed into one socially acceptable sentence. I could have told him I had moved apartments 3 times. I could have mentioned becoming senior designer at Hawthorne Creative, buying my first decent car, or finally learning how to cook something besides pasta. I could have told him that for almost a year after he left, I had avoided the diner where we used to spend Sunday mornings because seeing our usual booth made my chest hurt. Instead, I said, "I have been good." Nathan nodded slowly. "I am glad." Someone called his name from across the ballroom. He looked toward the voice, then back at me. "Ryan, could we talk sometime?" I almost laughed, not because anything was funny, but because 6 years ago I would have given anything to hear that question. I had called him after our breakup. I had written messages and deleted them. I had spent months inventing conversations where Nathan finally explained why our future had suddenly become something he could leave behind. Eventually, I stopped waiting. Now he was standing in front of me asking for the conversation I had once desperately wanted. "I do not think that is a good idea," I said. The disappointment on his face was immediate, but he did not argue. "Okay." That surprised me. The Nathan I remembered would have tried to explain, persuade, fix the moment before accepting that he could not control it. This Nathan simply stepped back. "It was good seeing you, Ryan." I watched him walk toward the other side of the ballroom, and every sensible part of me said to let him go. I had already survived losing him once. I had built a life that did not require answers from Nathan Carter. Then he stopped near the doorway and glanced back at me. For one brief second, neither of us looked away. And the worst part was realizing that 6 years had taught me how to live without him. But they had not taught me how to feel nothing when he came back. By the time I left the fundraiser, I had convinced myself that seeing Nathan had been nothing more than an unpleasant coincidence. Boston was a large city, but apparently not large enough to guarantee that the person who broke your heart would remain safely on the opposite side of the country. I walked 3 blocks to the parking garage with my coat pulled tight against the cold, repeating the same thought until it almost sounded believable. I had a good life. I had work I cared about, friends who knew when to challenge me and when to leave me alone, and a 1-bedroom apartment in South Boston that finally felt like mine instead of somewhere temporary. Nathan had no place in any of it. On Monday morning, I arrived at Hawthorne Creative before 9 and buried myself in a branding presentation for a local restaurant group. My desk looked exactly the way I liked it. Sketchbook on the left, coffee on the right, headphones beside my keyboard, nothing carrying a memory I had not chosen. Claire appeared beside me around 10 with 2 coffees and the expression of someone who already knew she was about to annoy me. "So," she said, "are we pretending Saturday never happened?" "That is exactly the plan." "Interesting plan." "Thank you." She placed 1 coffee on my desk. "You look like you had seen a ghost." Ghosts are less complicated. Claire knew enough about Nathan to understand why I had left the fundraiser early. She had met me 2 years after the breakup, when I could finally tell the story without sounding like I was still waiting for a different ending. Did he say why he was there? She asked. No. Did you ask? Also no. Are you curious? I looked at my monitor. Curiosity is not the same thing as wanting someone back in your life. Claire accepted that answer, which was inconvenient because I had hoped arguing with her would distract me. The truth was that Nathan had followed me home without actually following me anywhere. I remembered the way he had stepped back when I said no. I remembered the disappointment on his face. Mostly, I remembered how different that was from the man who had left Boston 6 years earlier after making a decision that affected both of us, as if only one opinion mattered. That evening, I drove home through slow traffic and made dinner while an old sitcom played in the background. Nothing dramatic happened. That was the point. I had spent years learning to appreciate ordinary days because ordinary days did not suddenly announce that they had accepted a job 3,000 miles away. Ordinary days did not tell you that maybe love was not enough and then expect you to understand. I had just finished washing my plate when my phone buzzed on the counter. For one irrational second, I thought it might be Nathan, even though he did not have my current number. It was Claire. She had sent me the website for the fundraiser organization. I nearly ignored it until I noticed the photograph attached to the event recap. Nathan stood beside several board members beneath a caption identifying him as the new marketing strategy director for a Boston-based consulting firm. I read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Seattle was gone. The distance I had depended on for 6 years was gone with it. Nathan had not been visiting Boston. He had come back. Knowing Nathan was back in Boston should not have changed anything. But for the next several days, I caught myself noticing places I had trained myself not to associate with him. A coffee shop near Back Bay reminded me of rainy Saturday mornings. A song playing quietly in a grocery store brought back a road trip neither of us had planned properly. Even the smell of pancakes from a diner near my office made me remember Sunday mornings when Nathan would steal the strawberries from my plate and insist he was helping because I never ate them anyway. Before Nathan became the man I avoided, he had been the person I wanted beside me for almost everything. We met 6 years earlier at a small bookstore cafe in Cambridge, when I was 22 and still trying to convince potential employers that my design portfolio was more impressive than my lack of experience. I had claimed a corner table with my laptop, sketchbook, and enough papers to make it obvious I did not want company. Nathan ignored every warning sign. "Is anyone sitting here?" he asked, pointing at the empty chair across from me. Technically, no. That sounds less welcoming than a normal no. I looked up and found a 24-year-old stranger holding coffee and smiling like rejection was merely an interesting possibility. Every other table was occupied, so I let him sit. He noticed the logo sketches covering my notebook and asked whether I was a designer. I told him I was trying to become one. He said he worked in marketing and therefore had professional experience pretending to understand designers. I should have found him irritating. Instead, 20 minutes later, my laptop had gone untouched because we were still talking. Nathan had an easy way of making ordinary conversation feel personal without becoming intrusive. He asked questions and actually listened to the answers. When the cafe began closing, he looked almost surprised that 2 hours had passed. "Can I buy you coffee again when there are empty tables and you cannot blame overcrowding for talking to me?" he asked. I said yes. One coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends wandering through Boston with no destination. Eventually, Nathan learned that I hated being late, preferred diner coffee to expensive coffee, and became quiet whenever I was worried about something. I learned that he called his mother every Wednesday, could not cook anything without checking a recipe 3 times, and secretly loved old romantic comedies while publicly claiming they were predictable. By our second year together, we had routines that felt permanent. Sunday breakfast happened at a small diner near Beacon Hill, always in the same booth when it was available. Nathan ordered blueberry pancakes. I ordered eggs, toast, and coffee. He still stole anything from my plate that he believed I was neglecting. One winter morning, snow covered the sidewalks outside while we sat across from each other arguing about where we might live someday. Nathan wanted bigger windows. I wanted enough room for a proper design desk. "We are going to need an unreasonable apartment," he said. "You are the one demanding windows. Natural light matters. You work in marketing. Marketing professionals deserve sunlight." I laughed so loudly that the server looked over. Nathan smiled at me, and I remember thinking with absolute certainty that I would hear that laugh and see that face across tables for years. That was the dangerous thing about remembering him now. The ending had become so painful that sometimes I forgot how good everything before it had been. Nathan had not broken my heart because I had been foolish enough to love the wrong person from the beginning. He had broken it because, for a long time, loving him had felt completely right. The beginning of the end arrived on an ordinary Tuesday evening, which somehow made it worse. Nathan came to my apartment carrying takeout from our favorite Thai place. But instead of complaining about Boston, traffic, or stealing one of my spring rolls, he placed the food on the kitchen counter and stood there with both hands in his coat pockets. I knew immediately that something was wrong. What happened? I asked. Nathan looked at me for several seconds. I got an offer. I smiled because I thought this was good news. He had spent months trying to move into a larger strategy role, and I knew how much it mattered to him. Nathan, that is great. It is in Seattle. My smile disappeared. Seattle was almost 3,000 miles away, but distance itself was not what frightened me. It was the expression on his face. He did not look like someone bringing a problem for us to solve together. He looked like someone who had already solved it alone. When did you find out? Last week. Last week. I needed time to think. Without me. Nathan looked down. I did not know what to say. I remember standing in my kitchen, staring at the man I had loved for nearly 2 years, wondering when our future had become something he could consider without including me. Do you want the job? I asked. Yes. His answer came quickly. Then we figure it out. Ryan. The way he said my name made my stomach drop. People do long distance, I continued. Or maybe I eventually move. My work is flexible enough that I could look at options. We do not have to decide everything tonight. That is exactly the problem. What is? Nathan rubbed a hand across his face. You are already rearranging your life around this. I am talking about possibilities. And what happens if you move and hate Seattle? What happens if I hate the job? What happens if we spend a year flying across the country and eventually resent each other? Then we deal with those things if they happen. Nathan shook his head. I cannot ask you to build your life around a decision I made for my career. You are not asking. I am choosing to have the conversation. That should have been the moment he understood. Instead, fear made him retreat further. Maybe loving each other is not enough. I still remember how quiet the apartment became after those words. What does that mean? I asked. Nathan's eyes were filled with something. I could not understand then. It means maybe we are trying to hold on to something that cannot survive what comes next. You decided that in 1 week? I am trying to be realistic. No, you are deciding for both of us. Nathan did not answer. That silence hurt more than anything he could have said. I asked whether he wanted to end our relationship. He stared at the floor before finally saying, I think it is better if we do. Better. I hated that word for years afterward. There was nothing better about watching him leave my apartment that night. Nothing better about waking up the next morning and remembering that the person who had once planned imaginary apartments with me had decided our real future was too uncertain to attempt. Nathan moved to Seattle 3 weeks later. I called him once before he left, hoping distance from that terrible conversation had changed something. It had not. Eventually, I stopped calling. Years passed, and I learned to tell myself that Nathan had chosen his career over me. That explanation was easier than admitting what truly broke my heart. He had never given me the chance to choose with him. And now, 6 years later, he was back in Boston, while the sentence I thought I had buried with our relationship was suddenly alive in my head again. Maybe loving each other is not enough. For the next week, I told myself that knowing Nathan lived in Boston did not mean I would see him again. Then Thursday afternoon proved how little control I had over coincidence. Hawthorne Creative had volunteered to redesign promotional materials for a neighborhood arts initiative, and Claire dragged me to the first planning meeting at a community center in Back Bay. I walked into the conference room carrying my laptop and stopped when I saw Nathan standing beside the windows. He noticed me at the same moment. Neither of us moved. You have got to be kidding me, I said quietly. Claire followed my gaze. Oh, Nathan was apparently representing one of the corporate sponsors through his new consulting firm. I considered leaving, but that would have meant abandoning a project I had agreed to support before Nathan reappeared in my life. I refused to give him that much power over my choices. So I took a seat across the table. For the next hour, Nathan behaved exactly as any professional colleague should. He discussed audience outreach, asked practical questions, and never tried to turn the meeting into something personal. Somehow, that made me more aware of him. When the meeting ended, I packed my laptop quickly. Claire offered to wait, but I told her I would meet her downstairs. I had almost reached the door when Nathan spoke. Ryan, can I have 5 minutes? I stopped. 6 years ago, I had wanted hours. Now 5 minutes felt dangerous. 5, I said. Nathan nodded and remained on the opposite side of the table. I should have told you Saturday that I moved back. Why? Because I imagined finding out another way made it look like I was hiding it. Were you? No. I moved back 3 months ago. My company offered me the Boston position, and I accepted. Why Boston? Nathan gave a small, tired smile. My mother is getting older. My sister has 2 kids now. I spent 6 years building a career 3,000 miles from everyone I cared about, and eventually I started asking what exactly I was building it for. I folded my arms. You came back for your family. Yes. He paused. But when I realized you were still here, I hoped I might eventually get the chance to apologize. The word landed differently than I expected. You already apologized when we broke up. No. I said I was sorry you were hurt. That is not the same thing. I looked at him. Nathan did not move closer. I made a decision that belonged to both of us, he continued. I told myself I was protecting you from uncertainty, but really I was protecting myself from having to face it. I was scared, and I turned that fear into a choice you never got to make. For 6 years, that was exactly what I had wanted him to understand. Hearing it now did not erase anything. You do not get to come back and say the right words like they fix what happened. I know. Do you? Yes. His voice stayed steady. I am not asking you to forget it. I am not even asking you to forgive me today. Then what are you asking? Nathan took a breath. A chance to let you know who I am now. I almost answered immediately, but something stopped me. Maybe it was the fact that he had not defended himself once. Maybe it was because he had finally named the exact wound he had caused without asking me to make him feel better about it. I do not know you anymore, I said. That is fair. And you do not know me. Also fair. I picked up my bag. So do not expect the Ryan you left 6 years ago. Nathan's expression softened. I would not insult you by doing that. I reached the door before looking back. The project meetings stay professional. Absolutely. And if I say I need space, you give it to me. I will. I nodded and left. In the elevator downstairs, Claire looked at my face and asked what happened. I stared at the closing doors and realized something I was not ready to admit aloud. Nathan had finally said exactly what I needed to hear 6 years ago. The problem was that I no longer knew whether hearing it 6 years late changed anything. For 3 days after that meeting, Nathan did exactly what I had asked. He did not call, message, or invent an excuse to contact me through the project. I should have been relieved. Instead, his silence left me thinking about every word he had said. By Sunday afternoon, I was irritated enough with myself to take a long walk through the public garden despite the cold. Claire joined me with coffee and the patience of someone waiting for me to admit something obvious. You are thinking about him, she said. I am thinking about what he said. That sounds suspiciously similar. I looked toward the pond. He finally understands why I was angry. Does that make you less angry? No. I considered it. Maybe. I do not know. Claire nodded. Then you do not have to know yet. That should have been obvious, but for years I had imagined only 2 possible endings if Nathan ever returned. Either I would forgive him because I still loved him, or I would reject him because I had finally moved on. I had never imagined the uncomfortable middle, where forgiveness and trust were separate decisions. The next project meeting was Tuesday evening. Nathan arrived early, greeted everyone, and took a seat. Several chairs away from me. He never tried to catch my attention. During the meeting, we disagreed over the campaign schedule, and for 20 minutes we spoke to each other exactly like 2 professionals with different opinions. It was strangely reassuring. When everyone began packing up, Nathan remained behind to organize his notes. I could have left. Instead, I heard myself say, "You asked for a chance." He looked up. I did. I have been thinking about it. Nathan waited. 6 years earlier, he would have filled that silence. Now he let me own it. I cannot give you what you want, I said. His expression tightened slightly. Okay. You do not even know what I think you want. I am guessing you are about to tell me. I almost smiled, but the moment felt too important. I think you want another chance at us. I cannot give you that. Nathan nodded slowly. I understand. Do you? Yes. I hurt you. Coming back does not create an obligation for you to let me try again. There was no argument in his voice, and somehow that made this harder. I spent years rebuilding my life after you left, I said. I learned how to make plans without wondering whether someone might suddenly decide I was no longer part of theirs. I cannot throw that away because you have changed. I would never ask you to. Then what exactly are you asking? Nathan looked at me with an honesty that made me uncomfortable because it reminded me of the man I had once trusted completely. Nothing tonight. I frowned. What does that mean? It means you gave me an answer. I respect it. He closed his notebook. If working on this project together is uncomfortable, I can ask someone else from my company to take my place. I did not ask you to leave. I know. I am giving you the choice. Those words stopped me. Choice. The one thing he had taken from me 6 years ago was now the first thing he was offering back. Stay on the project, I said. All right. But that does not mean anything else. I know. Nathan picked up his coat and gave me a small smile. Good night, Ryan. I watched him walk out without looking back. There was no grand apology, no promise that he would win me over, no attempt to turn my refusal into the beginning of a negotiation. He simply accepted it. And standing alone in that conference room, I realized Nathan had done something the younger version of him never could. He had let me make a decision he did not like, and he had respected it anyway. Over the next few weeks, Nathan and I saw each other often enough for avoiding him to become more exhausting than simply accepting that he was there. The arts initiative moved from planning into production, which meant evening meetings, email chains, budget discussions, and one Saturday volunteer event at the community center. Nathan never crossed the boundary I had set. His messages stayed professional. He never suggested coffee afterward or found reasons to stand beside me when other seats were available. More importantly, he behaved the same way when he thought I was not paying attention. On Saturday morning, I arrived 20 minutes early and found him helping an elderly volunteer reorganize boxes of art supplies after a delivery had been placed in the wrong room. There was no audience and no reason to impress anyone. Later, when one of the sponsors questioned a design decision my team had made, Nathan could easily have agreed just to keep the sponsor happy. Instead, he calmly explained why the design supported the campaign goals and suggested testing both versions before changing anything. 6 years ago, Nathan had always been good at making people feel heard, but the younger version of him sometimes confused keeping everyone happy with solving the actual problem. This Nathan seemed more comfortable letting people disagree with him. I noticed that. I wished I had not. Around noon, Claire found me arranging printed materials on a table. You are watching him, she said quietly. I am working. You have been holding the same brochure for 30 seconds. I put it down. I am observing. That sounds healthier. It is not. She smiled and returned to the registration desk. An hour later, one of the volunteers asked Nathan whether he and I had worked together before. I was close enough to hear the question but pretended not to. We knew each other a long time ago, Nathan answered. That was all. He did not call me his ex. He did not explain our history. He did not turn something private into an easy story for a stranger. I felt an unexpected wave of gratitude. When the event ended, heavy rain had started outside. People gathered near the entrance while checking rides and opening umbrellas. I had walked from a parking garage nearly half a mile away that morning, and naturally my umbrella was sitting in my apartment. Nathan stood nearby with one in his hand. For a moment, I expected him to offer me a ride or suggest walking together. Instead, he looked at me and said, There are extra umbrellas behind the front desk. I saw them earlier. Thanks. He nodded and walked outside alone. It was such a small thing that nobody else would have noticed. I did. The old Nathan might have used the rain as an opportunity to help before asking whether I wanted help. The man who had returned to Boston gave me information and let me choose what to do with it. That evening, I sat in my apartment with takeout and realized I had spent weeks searching for evidence that Nathan's apology was temporary. I expected impatience. I expected him to become frustrated when I did not reward his effort. None of that happened. He simply kept his word. The following Tuesday, our project meeting ended earlier than expected. Everyone left except Nathan and me, who were packing materials into separate boxes. Nathan, I said. He looked up. Yes. There is a diner about 2 blocks from here. Surprise crossed his face, but he said nothing. I am getting coffee, I continued. If you want to come, you can. He studied me carefully. Are you sure? 6 years ago, he had made the choice for both of us. This time, the choice was mine. I am sure. Nathan picked up his coat, and as we walked toward the door together, I reminded myself that coffee was only coffee. The problem was that I remembered exactly where another cup of coffee with Nathan Carter had once led. The diner was not the one from our 20s, and I was grateful for that. This place had red vinyl booths, chrome trim, and a handwritten dessert board behind the counter. Nathan waited for me to choose a booth before, sitting across from me. Even that small gesture registered. A server appeared with 2 menus and asked what we wanted to drink. Coffee, I said. Nathan looked at me for half a second, then ordered his own. Years ago, he would have told the server exactly how I took mine before I could speak. When the mugs arrived, I added cream while Nathan watched the rain streaking the window. You remembered, I said. He looked back at me. Remembered what? How I take my coffee. Of course. But you did not order it for me. A quiet understanding passed across his face. I figured you might take it differently now. That answer affected me more than it should have. I do not. Nathan smiled slightly. Good to know. We talked about safe things first. Work. His sister's children. Claire's determination to reorganize every project she joined. Nathan told me Seattle had been beautiful, especially during the summers, but he had never stopped feeling like someone who intended to stay another year rather than someone building a permanent home. Did you ever almost come back? I asked. A lot. Why did you not? He turned his coffee mug slowly between his hands. At first, pride, then embarrassment. After enough time passed, I convinced myself coming back would only reopen things for you. I looked at him. There you go again. His expression changed immediately, deciding what was best for me. Nathan lowered his eyes. You are right. No defense. No explanation disguised as an excuse. Just acknowledgement. The server returned, and I ordered eggs, toast, and home fries. Nathan ordered blueberry pancakes. I stared at him. Seriously? What? 6 years, and you still order blueberry pancakes? Some decisions deserve consistency. I laughed before I could stop myself. The sound startled both of us. For 1 second, Nathan looked exactly like the 24-year-old man from Cambridge who had made me forget about my unfinished portfolio. Then the moment passed, leaving something warmer and more dangerous behind. When our food arrived, I noticed Nathan glance at my plate. There were strawberries beside my toast. He looked at them, then at me, but kept his hands around his own. Coffee mug. You can have them, I said. His eyebrows lifted. Are you sure? I still do not like strawberries. Nathan smiled and moved them onto his plate only after I pushed them toward him. It was ridiculous that such a small exchange could carry 6 years of history. The old familiarity was still there, but something had changed inside it. He remembered me, without assuming I had stayed the same. We finished dinner slowly. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. At the door, Nathan put on his coat. Thank you for inviting me. It was coffee. And dinner. Do not make it bigger than it was. I will not. He smiled. Good night, Ryan. He started toward the sidewalk. Nathan. He turned. I had spent the entire evening trying not to ask the question sitting behind every other question. When you left, I said, did you really believe you stopped loving me? His expression became completely still. Then he looked at me with the same blue eyes I remembered from that terrible Tuesday night. No, he said quietly. That was the problem. I never stopped. I stood beneath the diner awning while the mist drifted through the streetlights, trying to understand why Nathan's answer made me angry instead of relieved. For years, I had assumed the simplest explanation was the correct one. He had stopped loving me. He had chosen Seattle, chosen his career, chosen a future that did not include me. That story had hurt, but at least it made sense. You never stopped? I asked. Nathan shook his head. No. Then why did you make leaving sound like the only possible answer? He looked toward the wet sidewalk. Because I was scared of what staying together would require from both of us. And I convinced myself ending things quickly would hurt less than watching us fail slowly. You were wrong. Completely. I folded my arms against the cold. Do you know what I hated most afterward? Nathan waited. I hated that you made me question whether any of it had been real. Every Sunday breakfast, every plan, every stupid conversation about apartments we could not afford. I kept thinking that maybe I had imagined how serious we were. You did not imagine it. I know that now. My voice became quieter, but I did not know it then. Nathan's expression tightened with regret, but he did not interrupt. And here is the part one never told anyone. I continued. I never really hated you. I wanted to. It would have been easier. I hated what you made me believe about love. What did I make you believe? That someone could love you on Monday and decide by Tuesday that you were no longer worth the uncertainty. Nathan looked down for a moment. Ryan, you were never the thing I was uncertain about. That does not make it better. I know. Then what were you uncertain about? He took a slow breath. Myself. The job. The distance. Whether I could be the person you needed while trying to become whoever I thought I was supposed to be. I treated fear like evidence that our relationship was doomed. I studied him beneath the warm light spilling from the diner windows. What happens if you get scared again? Nathan did not answer immediately, and strangely, I appreciated that. A quick promise would have sounded rehearsed. I probably will, he finally said. About something. Everyone gets scared. That is not exactly comforting. I am not trying to comfort you with something I cannot guarantee. He stepped no closer. What I can tell you is that I understand what I did. I made fear into a decision and called it practicality. I do not want to live like that anymore. A car passed through the intersection, tires whispering across the wet pavement. You keep saying you have changed, I said. I know words are not enough. No, they are not. Nathan nodded. Then judge what I do. That sentence stayed with me. He was not asking me to trust his version of himself. He was asking me to watch. I should go, I said. All right. We walked in opposite directions, and for the first time since he returned, I did not feel like I was escaping him. 2 days later, an email arrived about the arts initiative. Nathan's firm had been invited to support a regional campaign that would require several months of travel between Boston, New York, Philadelphia, and Washington. I stared at his name beneath the project assignment. 6 years earlier, a career opportunity had been the moment Nathan decided our future without me. Now another one had appeared before we had even decided whether there was an us to protect. And despite everything he had said outside that diner, one question immediately returned. What would Nathan Carter do when leaving became an option again? I expected Nathan to wait until the next project meeting to mention the travel assignment. Instead, he called the following evening. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me answering mattered. Hi, I said. Hi. Do you have a minute? Yes. Nathan paused. I wanted you to hear this from me before we see each other Tuesday. My company offered me the regional campaign. I saw the email. Then you know there will be travel. Several months. Yes, but Boston remains my home base. Most trips would be 2 or 3 days at a time. I stood beside my apartment window, looking down at the headlights moving along the street. 6 years earlier, Nathan had waited an entire week before telling me about Seattle. Now he had called before making his decision. I hated how clearly I noticed the difference. Are you taking it? I asked. I have not decided yet. Why not? Because I wanted to talk to you first. My chest tightened. Nathan, we are not together. I know. Then you do not need my permission. I am not asking permission. His voice remained calm. I am telling you because you asked what happens when I get scared again. This assignment scares me for reasons that have nothing to do with the work. I leaned against the window frame. Because of what happened before. Yes. Silence settled between us. Then Nathan said, 6 years ago, I thought being certain meant having every answer before I talked to you. I do not believe that anymore. So what do you believe? That if someone matters to me, they deserve the truth before I turn uncertainty into a decision. I closed my eyes briefly. He was doing exactly what I had challenged him to do. Still, part of me wanted something stronger. Can you promise me you will never disappear again? I asked. Nathan was quiet for several seconds. No. The answer hurt, even though I respected it. That is honest. I can promise something else. What? I cannot promise that I will never be afraid, never get another opportunity, or never face a decision that changes my plans. Nobody can promise those things honestly. His voice softened. But I can promise that I will not decide what you feel, what you can handle, or what choices you should be allowed to make. If there is ever an us again, I will talk to you before I make a decision that affects us. I did not answer immediately. 6 years ago, Nathan had tried to protect me from uncertainty by removing me from the equation. Now he was offering something less romantic than forever and somehow more meaningful, participation. What do you want to do about the assignment? I asked. Professionally, I want it. It is good work, and I would still spend most weeks in Boston. Then take it. Ryan, I did not call so you would make the decision for me either. Despite myself, I laughed. That was annoyingly mature. I have had 6 years to practice. The humor faded, but the warmth remained. Take the job if you want it, I said. Just do not confuse travel with leaving. Nathan became quiet. I will remember that. After we ended the call, I stayed by the window for a long time. I had spent years believing that what I needed from Nathan was a promise that he would never leave again. Now I understood that was impossible. People changed jobs. Cities changed. Plans changed. Fear returned. The real question was what someone did when those changes arrived. Nathan had once answered uncertainty by closing a door before I could speak. This time, before choosing anything, he had opened one. On Tuesday morning, Nathan sent a brief message saying he had accepted the regional campaign. There was no dramatic explanation, just the facts. Boston would remain his home base. His first trip would be to New York the following week, and he would be gone for 2 nights. I read the message twice before realizing I was waiting for the familiar panic that used to follow any thought of Nathan leaving. It never came. At the community center that evening, he arrived carrying a folder and 2 coffees for the project coordinator. He did not bring one for me, which strangely made me smile. He had stopped assuming that remembering what I liked gave him permission to make choices for me. During the meeting, we worked through the final campaign schedule while volunteers prepared artwork in the next room. Everything felt ordinary until Nathan mentioned that his train to New York left Monday morning. For half a second, the past tried to replace the present. I saw my old apartment, the untouched takeout on the counter, and Nathan telling me Seattle was already decided. Then I looked at the man sitting across from me. This time, there had been no secret week of planning. No finished decision disguised as a conversation. He had told me before accepting. After the meeting, Nathan walked with me toward the parking garage. Cold air moved between the buildings, and our footsteps echoed along the sidewalk. You seem quiet, he said. I am thinking. About the trip? About you telling me before you accepted it. Nathan slipped his hands into his coat pockets. I said I would. People say a lot of things when they want another chance. He stopped walking. Ryan, I need you to know something. I turned toward him. I am not doing this because I expect a reward. If you never want to be with me again, I still needed to become someone who handles difficult choices differently. That landed harder than any romantic promise could have. Why did it take losing me to learn that? I asked. Nathan looked down for a moment. Because sometimes consequences teach what regret cannot. I had no answer for that. We continued walking until we reached the garage entrance. When do you get back? I asked. Wednesday night. And then Philadelphia? 2 weeks later. I nodded. Nathan watched me carefully. Are you asking because of the project? No. The word came out before fear could edit it. His expression changed, but he stayed quiet. I think that is what scares me, I admitted. I am starting to care where you are again. Nathan took a slow breath. You do not have to rush because of me. I know. And you do not owe me trust because I handled one decision correctly. I know that too. I looked toward the garage, then back at him. But maybe trust is not something that comes back all at once. Maybe it is not supposed to. Nathan smiled gently. Maybe it is just a lot of small choices. That night, I realized I had been measuring him against the worst decision he ever made, waiting to see whether the same man would appear when circumstances became difficult. The opportunity had finally arrived, and Nathan had not repeated the past. More importantly, he had not asked me to pretend the past never happened. On Monday morning, his train left Boston for New York. At 8:15, my phone buzzed with a message from him telling me he had arrived at South Station. I stared at it for a moment, then typed back 4 simple words. Have a safe trip. It was not forgiveness. It was not a promise. But for the first time in 6 years, Nathan was leaving Boston, and I did not feel abandoned. Nathan returned Wednesday night exactly when he said he would. I knew because at 7:43 my phone lit up with a message telling me his train had reached Boston and that the New York meetings had gone well. I stared at the screen longer than necessary before replying, "Welcome back." 2 words, nothing more, but I noticed how natural they felt. Over the next several days, I kept thinking about what had changed between us. Nathan had not erased 6 years of distance with one apology. He had done something harder. He had allowed me to see consistency where there had once been uncertainty. On Saturday morning, I walked past a coffee shop in Back Bay and nearly called him before stopping myself. Then I realized I was still behaving as though every feeling needed to be defended against. So I called. Ryan. Nathan sounded surprised. Are you busy? Not really. Can you meet me? 40 minutes later, he arrived at the public garden wearing a dark coat and carrying coffee for himself. He looked at my empty hands. Do you want one? Later, we walked beneath bare trees while families and runners moved along the paths around us. For several minutes, neither of us mentioned why I had asked him there. Finally, I stopped near a bench. I have been unfair about something. Nathan frowned. What? I keep waiting for you to prove that you are the same person who left me. Every time something changes, I expect you to make the same choice again. I gave you a reason to expect that. Yes, you did. But lately you have been giving me reasons not to. Nathan said nothing. I appreciated that he understood this was my conversation to finish. I do not want our old relationship back, I said. His face fell slightly, but I continued. Because that relationship ended 6 years ago. We were different people. If we tried to recreate it, I would spend every day comparing you to who you were, and you would spend every day trying to compensate for what happened. Nathan looked at me carefully. What are you saying? My heart was beating harder than it had any right to on a quiet Saturday morning. I am saying that if there is another chance, it has to be something new. Hope appeared in his expression so quickly that I almost laughed. Are you offering me another chance? I am offering you dinner. Dinner. One date. A real one. No project meeting afterward. No pretending we happen to end up at the same diner. Nathan smiled. I would like that. There are conditions. Of course there are. We go slowly. If something is wrong, we say it. If either of us is scared, we talk about it instead of making decisions for the other person. Agreed. And you do not spend the entire date apologizing. He laughed softly. That one might be difficult. Practice. Nathan looked at me for a long moment. Friday. Friday works. We started walking again, and our shoulders came close without touching. I remembered another version of us walking through Boston years earlier, believing love alone would protect us from every difficult decision. We had been wrong. Love had not failed because it was weak. We had failed because we did not know how to carry uncertainty together. At the edge of the garden, Nathan turned toward me. Ryan, thank you. I shook my head. Do not thank me yet. You still have to survive the first date. His smile widened. I am cautiously optimistic. I smiled back. For the first time since Nathan returned, I was not wondering whether I could recover what we had lost. I was wondering what two older, wiser men might build if they stopped trying to return to the past and finally allowed themselves to begin again. 3 months later, Nathan and I walked into the old Beacon Hill diner on a cold Sunday morning, and somehow the place looked smaller than I remembered. The red booths were faded, the coffee still smelled stronger than necessary, and the same narrow windows faced a street crowded with people in winter coats. We had passed the diner several times since starting over, but neither of us had suggested going inside until that morning. Nathan stopped beside our old booth. This one, he asked. I smiled at the question. Years ago, he would have assumed. This one. We sat across from each other, and a server handed us menus even though I already knew what Nathan was searching for. Do not tell me, I said. Blueberry pancakes. He looked offended. I was considering waffles. For how long? At least for seconds. I laughed. 3 months had not magically repaired everything. There had been uncomfortable conversations, moments when old fears returned, and days when Nathan traveled for work and I had to remind myself that a train leaving Boston was not the same as someone leaving my life. But Nathan called when plans changed. I told him when something bothered me instead of pretending I was fine. Neither of us was perfect at it. We were simply better at staying in the conversation. After we ordered, Nathan looked around the diner. Did you ever think we would sit here again? No. He nodded, accepting the answer without disappointment. I looked through the window at pedestrians moving along the sidewalk. Actually, I think that is why being here matters. What do you mean? I spent years believing that if I ever forgave you, it would mean what happened did not matter anymore. Nathan's expression became serious. It mattered. I know. But forgiveness did not erase it. It changed what I decided to carry forward. Our coffee arrived. Nathan waited until I added cream to mine before smiling. Still the same. Some decisions deserve consistency. He laughed at his own words coming back to him. Breakfast arrived a few minutes later. There were strawberries beside my eggs. Nathan noticed them but did not move. I pushed the small dish across the table. You can have them. Are you sure? Nathan, if my opinion about strawberries changes, you will be the first person I tell. He smiled and took them. The simplicity of the moment almost overwhelmed me. 6 years earlier, we had believed love meant knowing each other so completely that nothing needed to be said. Now I understood something different. Love was not mind reading. It was asking, listening, giving someone room to choose, then trusting them enough to hear the answer. Nathan looked down at his coffee. Do you remember what I said that night? I did not need him to explain. Maybe loving each other is not enough. Regret crossed his face. I wish I had never said it. I do not. Nathan looked surprised. You were right about one thing. Love was not enough. I reached across the table and rested my hand beside his. Not without honesty. Not without courage. Not without letting the other person have a voice. Nathan slowly placed his hand over mine. And now, I looked at the man who had once walked away because he was afraid of an uncertain future, then at the man who had returned without demanding that I forget the past. Now we have more than we had then. Outside, Boston moved through another ordinary Sunday morning. Nathan smiled, and this time I did not wonder how long the moment would last. We had stopped promising each other certainty. We were choosing something harder and better. Whatever came next, neither of us would have to choose it alone.